Fox 6 News at 10.
An emotional reunion in San Diego. Out of a lot of bad came just a little bit of good. So, incredible story.
שלא ייגמר לעולם החול והים רשרוש של המים ברק השמיים טבילת האדם החול והים רשרוש של המים ברק השמיים טבילת האדם אלי שלא ייגמר ראש של המים ברק השמיים טבילת האדם.
First Class in Hell. And I wrote a poem which I think will make it clear why I call it by this name. The poem itself is called Classes in Hell. In picturesque Mauthausen, ruthless guards whipped and beaten the prisoners to carry heavy blocks of granite on their exhausted bodies. With lashes and kicks, they forced the ordeal into the deep chasm of the quarry below. The SS men amused themselves with this mode of execution, which they called the parachute jump without parachute. Mind you, the Nazis had designed a hierarchical ladder of suffering by torture, cruelty, and sadism. In the lager system of the Third Reich, more than one way of grief existed, more than one Via Dolorosa led to Calvary. Mauthausen was a class free camp, the harshest and the cruelest among the Nazi lagers. Prisoners transferred to it from Auschwitz missed and longed for their dreadful old death camp. I was a deportee in Strashof, a nefarious machine of slow death by exhaustion. It was a slave labor camp in which barbed wire surrounded hunger, misery, and privation. I was an inmate in a brutal lager, emaciated, sick, and hallucinating about food and a warm room. Nevertheless, compared to Mauthausen and Auschwitz, Strashof was first class in hell.
In the end of June 1944, the gendarmes put our family and the community of Szeged on a train which deported us to Strashof, a concentration camp near Vienna. My mother, my sister, and a lot of strangers were on the train. Some 80 people were crammed into a wagon, and the journey lasted 3 or 4 days until we got into Strashof. And at the border between Hungary and Austria, the dead bodies were removed from the train. And so we found ourselves in a concentration camp, surrounded by barbed wire fence and some moats filled with water. And upon arrival, we were disinfected. We were put into a huge place where we had to shower, and that's it. So when the Germans took us to the showers, my mother told me to pay attention and to be next to her, but somehow I got lost. And I came out of the shower, naked, and outside it was cold, and there was one Jewish man who saw me and took pity on me, and he said, "Sit down," and he put a blanket on me, and he even offered me some food. And I don't know how much time passed, but probably it was an hour or something, and suddenly my mother came with Vera, and she was very angry with me and scolded me. And she was right, but that was it. It was lucky she found me in the end.
I'm looking at my
Historical record? Flight?
December.
Flight missions?
I'm looking at my historical record, and
I see.
one of the missions
Which one?
was Black Hammer, December 2nd, 1944. On December 2nd, we bombed. The target was Black Hammer. Black Hammer was an oil complex, synthetic oil complex, in Auschwitz. Auschwitz was a massive area on the border between Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Germany. And this is the famous Auschwitz where at least 2 million Jews and others were murdered by the Nazis. On that particular day, it was a cold day, as I remember, and we found our target. I synchronized my bomb sight, and I hollered bombs away. During this moment, we were attacked terribly by German fighters and by anti-aircraft. And within seconds, the 15th Air Force, namely my squadron and my group, the plane were attacked so badly that our planes were just dropping like flies. One moment you're looking at the plane beneath us, beneath my plane, and all of a sudden you saw nothing, just smoke. The plane blew up completely. Right after I dropped my bombs, I got a hysterical call from my captain, my CO, the pilot of my plane, saying, "Larry, come up here quick, emergency." I took my parachute and my oxygen, because we were 26,000 feet, and I got to the point where the captain waved to me. "Look," he said, "one bomb hung up, and the bomb could be ticking and could be blown up a second. You got to go out and get that bomb." So I said to the engineer, "Close the bomb bay door, one of the other bomb bay door, so we can crawl out and get that bomb and toggle it out." And he said, "I can't, the bomb bay door is frozen." I said, well, whoever goes out there is going to take off his parachute and take off his oxygen mask. You only have about 25 or 30 seconds before you fall unconscious down to the ground. And the engineer didn't volunteer to go, and I did. And I crawled out there without the bomb set, without the parachute, and without the oxygen. I was able to pull a lever to get rid of the bomb. The bomb disappeared below us. And I made it back into the plane. When I got back in the plane, I passed out. And they got me around with oxygen, and I made it back to the base. At the base, the officer greeting us said, "You're going to have double portions of everything tonight." The only plane that made it back out of the 7 in our squadron is yours. All the other 6 planes were shot down. And I understand from group that 25 out of the 31 planes that took off that day were destroyed by the Nazis. It's probably the worst raid in the war that we had. Remember, the European Theater of Operations, between the 8th Air Force and the 15th Air Force, and also to a smaller extent the 9th Air Force, we lost 75,000 dead. So, although this was a horrible day, it wasn't the only horrible day we had, but in my mind, of course, this was a shocking disaster. And I've been awake at night a lot, thinking about the possible fall from the 26,000 feet without a parachute, without my oxygen. But we made it. I made it, and all my life it gave me a lot of satisfaction that I did what I had to do, and more so, and the crew was saved.
Larry Rosenberg received a Distinguished Flying Cross for the story he just told you. It is read, by the direction of the President, you have been awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross by the Commanding General of the 15th Air Force. The citation pertaining to this award is as follows. For extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight as bombardier against the enemy in the Mediterranean Theater of Operations.
Well, the day after the war started.
You said to yourself, I want to become a pilot?
Oh, yeah. Because the day after the war started, I went down and enlisted. I went through flying school. It took me 2 years to get through flying school. And then when I got out there, that's when I got it.
Where did you go to flying school?
Americus, Georgia, Greenville, Mississippi, Columbus, Mississippi. And I ended up in West Everfield in New York. And then that's where we picked up our airplane to fly overseas. And we picked that airplane up and flew across the ocean to England, down off the coast of Spain, and over to North Africa, to Morocco. March
of 1945. Okay.
Because I was missing in action after that.
Okay, so that was their last mission where you had to go to Strasov.
Yeah.
Okay, describe you're on your way to Strasov, what happened?
An engine. And we couldn't get back to get out over the Alps. It was too high. So we put place where we picked for an landing.
You had an emergency landing?
Yeah. But we all walked away.
It was awfully touching for me for him to be around here. And we became very fast friends again. When we went down, Hal said on our crash landing that if we didn't make that landing at that moment, we would have spun out of control and all would have been killed. So we felt very lucky, even though we landed behind Russian lines.
After you crash landed, what happened?
Well, the Bulgarians came over
the Bulgarians?
and surrounded the airplane. And then they turned us over to the Russians. And the Russians took us and put us in boxcars and moved us back then towards Vienna. Then we ended up near Bucharest, Romania.
Bucharest? You wrote, my last mission, number 203, on March 26, 1945, was to bomb the rail marshalling yards of Strasov, Austria. While over the target, our plane received enemy fire which took out one engine, and then the other engine lost power, so we were unable to fly back over the Alps to our base in Italy. You were taken near Pécs, Hungary. That's where you crash landed by Bulgarian partisans, who then
Well, so Strassov was a place where the people survived and died. Thousands of people out of the 20,000 that were deported to Strassov died eventually, if not of malnutrition.
How many died?
According to the estimate of historians, about 1/3 of the people who were in Strassov died. It means out of 20,000, 1/3 is about 6,000, right?
Yeah.
So what I can add is
Yeah.
Yes, right there.
That is your alternate.
This is a beautiful map.
So I'm holding here this map, which is an extraordinary thing. It's not printed on paper, but on silk, and the reason for that is that it prevents destruction or damage by being wet or exposed to rain or snow or the conditions of the weather. The map is of Hungary, part of Italy, part of Austria, and as a gift of Hal Rope, co-pilot on the mission, bombing mission 203 over the marshalling yards of Strassov. This gift is a very special one, and I really appreciate it. And I would add the area of Pécs, south of the Balaton.
How do you say it in Hungarian?
It is pronounced Pécs. It's P-E-C-S, but the pronunciation is Pécs. So this area, by the way, was one of the great lost battles of the Second World War in the Balaton area. There was a huge tank battle in that area at the end of the war.
So in April 1941, just before my 5th birthday, I was standing outside of our house on Peterfi Street, and suddenly I saw a huge column of the German army coming on the road, trucks and armored cars filled with German soldiers. They were on their way to invade Yugoslavia, just before Germany invaded the Soviet Union, which was 2 months later. So some of the few of the German soldiers and at least one armored car were billeted in our house on Peterfi Street. And the soldiers that came with them, they were very young people. They looked just out of high school, and they, behaved very politely, and they were actually nice. They also let me play with an armored car of theirs, and it made me very excited, of course, to climb on a German armored car and sit in the driver's place and put my hand on the steering wheel and even play with the all that it was in the driver's place. And then, when they left, the Holocaust unfolded, without my understanding or anything. But let's leave it that way, because it took still 3 years until the deportation. This was 1941, right? The deportation occurred in the summer of 1944. So that's what I can tell you about it. What Hitler did in Yugoslavia, it was terrible, and he did it because Yugoslavia was supposed to side with Hitler in the war, and they, broke their agreement with Hitler, and so Hitler wanted to punish Yugoslavia, and he bombed and destroyed Belgrade, the Yugoslav capital, and there was a terrible war that went on for years there in Yugoslavia. And there were the partisans of Tito who fought against Germany and eventually liberated the country. Actually, Yugoslavia was probably the only country in Europe which liberated itself from the Germans. Very excited. It was like, I could not believe it that I can sit in a military armored car of the Germans and play with it, and it was unbelievable. And it was. Think it over. This was during the Holocaust. Okay, a Jewish boy is playing with the German armored car. Not usual. No, the Germans stayed there because it was on the main street, and it has a very convenient location. And if I'm not
There for us. We are well, so don't worry about us. We pray the good Lord would watch over you and keep you well and happy. Take it easy. Relax, keep your chin up, and more love.
On March 26, 1945, 22 planes were on a mission to bomb the railway station of Strasov, Austria. Raymond Spihalski was the pilot of one of these planes. His plane was hit by German flak, and both engines on his plane were lost. He alerted the other 9 crew members on the plane to bail out. He kept the plane in the air long enough for every crew member to jump out. After all crew members jumped, Raymond Spihalski jumped out. But his parachute got caught onto one of the wings of the plane, and he was seen spiraling down and crashed with the plane. He was 21 years old. There are many witnesses and accounts regarding Raymond Spihalski's plunge to his death. Here is one statement given by Frank W. Well, Jr., pilot from the 746 Bombardier Squadron. While on the mission to Strasov, Austria, on 26 March 1945, I noticed that Lieutenant Spahalski lost 2 engines just about over the target. After leaving the target area, he fell behind our formation and 2 P-38s came down to give him cover. The lead ship in our formation called and asked me if I had enough gas to go back and give him cover. As I did, I circled back around and ended up above and behind Lieutenant Spahalski. I tried to make radio contact but was not successful, and we shot flares to try to warn him of flak area on his course, but could not contact him. Directly over St. Michael, I pulled out to his right to avoid the flak. We ended up in front of him and to his right, where by looking through field glasses, my waist gunner noticed his plane stall out and start to spin. This was at about 16,000 feet. My gunner reported that he thought he saw some shoots, but couldn't tell for sure or how many. The P-38, however, was still covering him, and the fighter pilot called me and reported seeing 9 shoots out and cleared, and the 10th chute opened but hung up on the doomed plane going down with it. My gunners saw the plane disappear behind the mountains. There was quite a lot of flak bursting at about the same altitude, 16,000 feet, as Lieutenant Spahalski's plane, and as we were busy dodging flak, we were unable to get over very close to him or observe the final crash. The P-38 pilot, who reported seeing the 9 chutes, had a good view of this disabled plane because he was flying back and forth above Lieutenant Spahalski's plane until it crashed.
Okay, so one day in the camp, I took Vera for a walk, and it was a sunny day and winter, cold, and there was to approach her, and then with her spoon gave some of the pudding to Vera to eat, and then she looked at me and the end she felt probably some pity on me too, and she gave me a spoon of the pudding to me, and it tasted wonderful. I still remember the taste.
What I remember is that I was hallucinating of food and a warm room. I remember being hungry all the time. I remember I was dreaming about a piece of bread, and I said when the way of liberation will come and we will have food on the table, I will have a piece of bread this thick, and on top of it there will be butter thick like this, and on top of the butter there will be jam thick like this. In other words, it will be a sort of sandwich with a bread 5 centimeter thick, 25 centimeter of butter, and 74 centimeter of marmalade on top of it, and again maybe a piece of bread.
So because of my age, which was younger, 8 years old, I wasn't working. But the children who were older, like over 10, they were working. She found some sandwiches that Austrian people put on the road. They knew that the prisoners are passing there, so sometimes they put food there, to help the prisoners. And my mother brought once that sandwich home, and it was delicious.
Stanley Todd, then 22, Army Air Corps Sergeant Nose Gunner from Richmond, Kentucky, was one of the crew members on Raymond Spahalski's plane that parachuted out as the pilot Raymond Spahalski yelled, "Hit the Silk Boys." Stanley Todd was captured by the Germans with other captured U.S. airmen. They were in the back of a Nazi troop carrier in the spring of 1945. The captured airmen were taken into the Graz-Wetzelsdorf SS garrison. Stanley Todd and 12 other men, including 7 of his B-24 crew members, were shoved against a stone wall, stripped to their waists, and told to keep their hands over their heads. A group of riflemen appeared with a cart to wheel away their bodies. They were about to be executed by the firing squad. Then, for reasons still unclear, a senior SS officer ordered the firing squad to put their weapons down, and the airmen
prisoners back to the camp, to Strashof. And there was no movement of that day, they left us there. Okay. And so this was 26th of March, and on the 9th of April we were liberated. Yeah, the bombing was a terrible experience. There were horrible, horrifying explosions, and some of the wagons were hit, and people died. And I remember, looking out at the railway station. It was burning. There were fires, and I saw Germans lying on the ground, wounded or dead, including soldiers. And that was something new for me, because
The following was written by George Leisure, one of the crew members on Raymond Spahalski's flight to Strasov. This was written in August 1945, after we were shot down on the 26th of March 1945. I hope my memory was accurate, but it may not be 100%. On the 26th of March 1945, I was flying as both bombardier and navigator on my 19th mission. We were briefed to bomb the marshalling yards at Strasov, Austria, about 14 kilometers north of Vienna.
The group formed as usual over Italy, flew north and east to Yugoslavia, then north along the Danube to Budapest, Hungary. Our number 1 engine began to smoke about half an hour before we reached Budapest, but we lost no power, so we continued on the mission. We flew over the target at the altitude of 19,000 feet and encountered a moderate amount of flak. The photographer was hit in the right arm and several holes were made in the plane. We left the target all the right and started south. The group had to drop to 17,000 feet to fly formation because of the lowering cirrus stratus clouds. Just after we crossed the Danube River between Vienna and Linz, our number 1 engine caught fire, so we had to feather it and extinguish the flames. We were forced to fall behind the group, but continued to hold our same altitude. Just as we crossed over the first hills of the Alps, we lost power in our number 2 engine and had to feather it as well. We flew on for approximately 15 minutes, losing some altitude. We intended to reach the other side of the Alps and fly south to an emergency landing field. However, as we flew over St. Michael's, Austria, we encountered an intense amount of flak and lost a 3rd engine, making it impossible for us to clear the last peaks of the Alps. So Ray, our pilot, told the crew to bail out. I took off my oxygen mask and hose in my heated flying suit. I was in the nose of the plane just behind the nose gunner position, so I opened the hatch. I sat down on the floor of the plane with my feet hanging out. I slid down in the opening a little and let go. I was surprised to find that I was facing upwards with my stomach on the underside of the plane. Something had caught on something and the airplane still had the hold of me. I pulled myself back up and tried it again. This time I made it clear of the plane. I started out feet first and decided to go to the hotel to see if these people would help me. As I approached the building, I was met by the biggest, meanest looking German Shepherd dog I had ever seen. Someone called the dog off and I showed them my identification card. When they learned that I was an American airman, they took me in and gave me food and hot tea. About half an hour later, I went into the hotel. 6 Nazi SS soldiers came there to stay. The lady who ran the place took me to a room upstairs and hid me. Those Nazis stayed in the hotel on the same floor as I was for 6 days. I stayed in the bed most of the time, partly to keep warm, but mostly to keep them from hearing me move around. Several times while the Nazis were there, American planes bombed the marshalling yard at
Yeah, I remember the day of liberation when a Russian soldier passed through the camp, and with him, the front was moving. There was no battle in the camp itself, but we heard for a long time, cannon fire for days, and this was in April 1945. The liberation happened on that day. There was a drunk Russian soldier who came to our barrack, and he was yelling us and shoved us to the wall, and he was yelling, "Where are the Germans? Niemcy, Niemcy," he was yelling, but at the end he left. Well, when early in April 1945 we were liberated by the Russians, my mother started to think of returning to Hungary, but there was total chaos. There were no trains, and my mother found somewhere a wheelbarrow, and she put Vera into that, and so we were walking from Strashof, which is a suburb of Vienna. We walked 70 kilometers to Bratislava, to the capital of Slovakia. And on the road, we had many adventures. One of them was a night that we spent in a school, in a gym. There were hundreds of liberated prisoners from the camp sleeping all on the floor. And the Russians, some Russians came in the night, and they wanted to take the women to rape them. And then we somehow found the train, and we were waiting to board the train, and it was cold, and I saw the engineer of the train with he was with not even with a shirt, just in an undershirt on the train, and that was then that I decided that I wanted to be a locomotive engineer because they are not cold. I was very cold at that time, so I was jealous of this engineer, seeing him so warm that he didn't need even a shirt. Yeah. So we took that train and it took us to Kistelek. Then we returned from the camps. We went to Kistelek to our house and opened it. The house, we found the house completely empty. It was, there was nothing inside left. No furniture. All the books of my mother disappeared. So we were, of course, very disappointed. But then, after a few days, when the neighbors heard that we are of affinity, and they became my heroes and brothers.
In June 2002, Hal Raup came across an article in the Liberator newsletter, a story written by Paul Hartel. To his surprise, Hal realized that the narrative he was reading detailed his involvement in Mission 203, which took place on March 26, 1945. The bombing was vividly described through the eyes of an 8-year-old Paul Hartel. Filled with excitement, Hal, who no longer drove on the highway, made an exception and got behind the wheel. Unable to contain his eagerness, he drove straight to Larry Rosenberg's house, the anticipation of sharing this discovery overwhelming him.
Real proud. The whole thing's a miracle. It's made my life meaningful.
As I wrote in my account of the liberation, I finished it with the words that the pilots and crewmen who took part in mission number 203 were aware that their target was the marshalling yard of Strashof, but were unaware whom they bombed. They possibly saved my life, and at the same time they almost killed me. I met not only Larry Rosenberg, but also the Hal Raup, and it was a very exciting and emotional meeting, and we became close friends. So it is a wonderful thing, and indeed a miraculous thing, that this meeting could have taken place. And I agree with Larry, who said several times that this meeting added additional meaning to his life. It did add an additional meaning to my life as well.